Socialism and neoliberalism, two powerful ideas. One claims to fight for fairness, the other for freedom. But what do they actually mean? And how do they compare when it comes to real-world power, wealth, and the way we live? Let's break it down, clearly, quickly, and without the waffle. At its heart, socialism is about collective ownership, especially of the things that generate wealth, like factories, land, banks, and services. The idea: if society works together to produce things, then society should also share the rewards. Socialists argue that under capitalism, the few get rich while the many stay stuck, and that essential services like healthcare or education should be run for public good, not private profit. Neoliberalism is all about the market. It says personal freedom is best protected when governments stay out of the way, cutting regulations, taxes, and public spending. Born from thinkers like Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, neoliberalism exploded in the 1980s with leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. It pushed free trade, privatization, and individual responsibility over state control. Where socialism says we're in this together, neoliberalism says you're on your own, and that's a good thing. Socialism in practice. There are different levels, from full state control, like the Soviet Union, to democratic socialism, like modern-day Scandinavia. In either case, the aim is redistribution, using tax, nationalized industries, or social programs to narrow the wealth gap. Neoliberalism in practice. Neoliberal systems prioritize low taxes on wealth, open global markets, and deregulation. Think flexible labor markets, privatized industries, minimal welfare states. In theory, this encourages innovation and growth. In practice, critics argue it creates extreme inequality, housing crises, and unstable financial bubbles. Enjoying the breakdown so far? Hit that like button if this helped you understand these ideas better, and subscribe for more philosophy, politics, and power explained clearly. What's the social impact? Socialism's promise: better equality, stronger safety nets. Supporters point to universal healthcare in the UK or affordable education in Finland as socialist wins. But critics say too much state control kills innovation, inflates bureaucracy, and, in extreme cases, leads to authoritarianism. Neoliberalism's legacy. Supporters say it lifted millions from poverty through global trade and entrepreneurship. But its critics argue it's turned citizens into consumers and democracies into markets. Since the 2008 financial crash, neoliberalism has faced growing backlash, but it still shapes most economies today. Real-world examples. The UK. Post-World War II, Britain leaned heavily socialist, nationalising rail, coal, healthcare. Then came Thatcher. Privatisation, deregulation, a sharp neoliberal turn. Or how about Sweden? Often seen as a socialist success story, but it's more of a hybrid. Strong welfare and taxes with open markets and private enterprise. But in recent years, loose migration policy inspired by socialist migration theories and neoliberal open market and movement of people policies has caused crime rates to explode. And then there's the United States, the poster child of neoliberalism since Ronald Reagan, though movements like Bernie Sanders' campaigns show rising interest in socialist ideas once again. Cynical thoughts. Protected thinkers? One thing rarely discussed in mainstream breakdowns of socialism is who we're allowed to criticize. Karl Marx is often held up as a revolutionary thinker, but few mention his deeply racist language or anti-Semitic writings, even though he was ethnically Jewish himself. In his private letters, Marx called people the N-word and described entire ethnic groups as degenerate, and even based some of his critiques on crude stereotypes. Yet you'll rarely hear this in left-leaning academic circles or on progressive platforms. Why? Because once someone becomes a symbol of a cause, the truth becomes inconvenient, and that happens on both sides. In reality, people learn how to game the system. Under socialism, Critics argue some people lose motivation to improve because the safety net becomes a hammock. Free housing, free benefits, and no real pressure to contribute. So why bother? But neoliberalism has its own freeloaders, just with more expensive suits. Billionaires park profits offshore, companies lobby for bailouts after risky bets, and the ultra-rich avoid tax while preaching hard work. Both systems have flaws, and wherever there's power or money, someone finds a way to take more than they give. Read more. Book recommendations. For Socialism, The Socialist Manifesto by Bhaskar Sunkara, a modern and accessible case for democratic socialism and how it could work in the 21st century. For Neoliberalism, Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman. The classic case for free markets, limited government, and why state power is a threat to liberty. Both books will challenge your views and deepen your understanding. Words that define them for socialism, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, by Karl Marx. A society becomes great when it cares more for the well-being of its poorest than the wealth of its richest. This is a modern paraphrasing often linked to socialist ideals. Neoliberalism. There is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. By Margaret Thatcher. The great advances of civilization, whether in architecture or painting, in science or literature, in industry or agriculture, have never come from centralized government. By Milton Friedman. Each side believes these words capture truth. Each side believes the other is dangerously naive. Conclusion: socialism versus neoliberalism. One promises equality through collective ownership. The other champions freedom through individual choice and open markets. But when we look at the real-world scorecard, the contrast is hard to ignore. Some of the most devastating chapters in modern history came under the banner of socialism, from Stalin's gulags and mass executions to Mao's Great Leap Forward, to the economic collapse and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Neoliberalism has its flaws: inequality, housing bubbles, financial crashes, but it's also powered some of the most successful economies on earth. Post-war West Germany, Thatcher's transformation of Britain, the rise of global trade lifting millions out of poverty in Asia. The one thing that's clear: neoliberalism has delivered far more functioning societies than socialism ever has. It may not be perfect, but compared to the mass repression, economic failure, and collapse seen under many socialist regimes, the record speaks for itself. Still, both systems deserve scrutiny, and both can be twisted or improved, depending on who's pulling the strings. Disagree? Then feel free to tell us why in the comments. Subscribe to HouseMoor Compares, where ideas are made clear and power made visible.